Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Insert the music here. Insert the music here. All right. Good evening, tribe, and welcome to Merriwether's World. I am your host, Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, broadcasting to you from the moon. Yes, I am in outer space tonight, which, if you think about it, is where all worlds are. So I guess I'm always kind of in outer space. Anyway, great show tonight. We have Dr. Christina Johnson on. She will be talking about her job as a space farmer, growing plants in space. Oh, cool. We got all sorts of people showing up. Hello, people. I'm waving at you down there on the Earth. Ooh, blue, scary monster things showing up. Okay, as usual, brief introduction for those of you who may be new here. Like I said, my name is Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen. I am creator of Foraging Texas, author of Idiot's Guide Foraging, creator of the Wazoo Foraging Bandana. And just a reminder, the colors are a little screwed up because of my camera. It's actually much more vivid than this. And other things. Usually I got 6 sponsors I'll be throwing out at you. Give them some love, hopefully. But also upcoming classes. If you go over to the Foraging Texas website and go to upcoming classes and you click get rid of the Google ad. And okay, so February 6th, I'll be at Spoke Hollow. The morning class is filled up already, but they've opened up an afternoon class. So if you're out in the Willoughby area and want to do a 4-hour excursion into the hill country, learning about the plants, that's where you want to go. Or the next day on Sunday, February 7th, if you just want to do like a 2-hour walk while drinking beer, we can go and meet me at Vista Brewing. They have 2 classes set up there too. And then I got to add more classes for 2021. I got some coming, but you'll just have to wait on those. All right. I got to go back to me. Okay, cool. Lots of people here. Hello, tribe. Hello, tribe. Remember, tribe? Let me do a little shrinkage here so I can see my notes because I need my notes. So sponsors. Oh, let's do this. So those of you who want to support me, always a pleasure. You can order my book from Amazon, and I also have an Amazon shop there that has different sections on foraging, wilderness survival, automobile, stuff, cool knives, things of that nature. But remember, my book, Idiot's Guide Foraging. So if you get it there, that helps out. Excuse me. And then I know Christmas has passed and everyone is probably looking at mountains of bills, but hey, just in case you decided I didn't spend all my money on Christmas, I should get Mark something. Hey, Amazon wish list. Okay. And then I just want to, again, put up the Wazoo Survival because Wazoo, actually, Christina, well, she can hear me. I don't know if she can see me. I haven't brought her on yet. But Wazoo Survival was created by a NASA astronaut who got tired of exploring space and wanted to spend more time in the woods. And so he makes all sorts of gear, but he was who I worked with to create the foraging bandana that has Dr. Nicole Appelian from Alone, History Channel's Alone. And them worked together to come up with the 12 best plants that you should know if you're going off into the wild. Okay, at this point, because I am so excited about tonight, I am going to bring forth our guest. Hello on Earth. Can you hear me? Actually, I guess you might be on the ISS. Anyway. Okay, it's just a great pleasure to finally have Dr. Johnson on. I've been trying for over a year. We go back much farther than that. We both love plants. We both are Catholic. It works out great. We both had young kids. She still has young kids. My kids have grown. I don't know how that worked.
It's probably biology there. But she is a space farmer. She works in the NASA labs trying to come up with ways to grow plants for the astronauts. So take it away, Dr. J. I mean, want to say, brief introduction,
Thank you. Yeah, so I look at, I'm at Kennedy Space Center and I'm a postdoctoral fellow. So I'm not actually like at NASA proper. I'm just with the NASA postdoctoral program. So that means I finished my PhD and I'm doing this research stint at NASA. And as much as I would love to be there full time as like the plant scientist, there's already people in those roles, right? There isn't really room for me yet. Hopefully soon.
We'll figure this. You'll be famous. They'll go, oh, we just need her as the face of NASA.
But no, I'm working with really amazing mentors here. I've got Ray Wheeler, who has been doing space crop production since the 90s. I've got Joya Massa, who's been here since, let's see, she's been doing space flight research with plants since 2000 something. I want to say 2004, but probably a little later than that. And then, we've got Howard Levine and, there's this whole team of people that are there. And some of the people who aren't NASA, but that are working with us in the same lab, we've got like this interesting culture of like the NASA folks. And then we also have all these contractors. And so I'm kind of this weird nebulous person who's in between everyone, like not officially anything.
that has both power and weakness. It's like,
yes.
I'm a ghost. I can go where I want.
Yeah.
I always look on the positive side. Yes.
Yeah. It's really nice because I do actually have lab access right now, and a lot of people don't. So I'm really grateful for it. I get to do my research. I get to grow plants, and So
it's probably not something you can do from home via Zoom and stuff like that. Sometimes
there is some of that.
Yeah, well, it's probably too much of that. Okay, so you've been doing this how long now? And because you've been involved through different periods with the NASA plant stuff.
I was recruited into space biology research in 2008. I started my PhD program in 2009 with Dr. John Kiss he was at Miami University at the time, and now he is in UNC Greensboro, North Carolina.
Cool.
And at that point, in 2010, I did a space shuttle mission with Arabidopsis, which is like this model plant organism. So basic research doing genetics with how plants responded in a spaceflight environment. And since then, I've been getting more into applied things like, growing plants on the International Space Station in the veggie hardware and also the advanced plant habitat. My specific research has not been chosen to go in these things yet, but I get to work with the team of scientists who make it all possible, which is awesome. So, but the hardware that I used with my experiment that was on the shuttle was the BRIC, biological research in canisters. So.
Okay.
They're little
biological research in canisters. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be why you were using the Arabidopsis. It's like a little mustard plant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Arabidopsis is a mustard, and I like growing mustards in general right now. Right now I'm doing a lot with the Microgravity Simulation Support Facility at Kennedy Space Center, which is a big mouthful, MSSF. Even I can't say it. Well, we're growing them on clinostats, and random positioning machines. So I'm taking these plants and I'm moving them constantly.
Okay, so they can never
to adjust to the gravity, and so it's essentially microgravity. You can also do hypergravity with these devices, but I stick with microgravity.
Okay, I was wondering how I thought, does NASA have anti-gravity technology? That'd be awesome. But okay, no, it's just spinning them around and multi-axis sort of thing. Gotcha, yes. Like that amusement park ride. Cool. Okay, so obviously the big burning question, the Martian, growing potatoes in space. Is that what you would have done if you were stuck there?
Oh, that's a really great question. I wouldn't get stuck there in the first place because I'm very much a ground person. I like supporting the people who are up there. Sorry, I'm not astronaut material. But actually, my mentor, Ray Wheeler, spent bunch of years working on developing the nutrient film technique with seed potatoes and also other crops. But he's done a lot with growing potatoes specifically in a Mars-like and lunar-like environment. And so the fact that they chose potatoes is kind of this homage to Regolith's work. And
Oh, wow.
yeah.
But did he do any consulting? I know the guy who wrote the book was from NASA, or was he with one of the contract companies?
He was probably one of the contractors. I don't honestly know, but Ray's always, in these discussions with people. So.
That's cool.
I'm not going to say he was definitely consulted, but it's one of those things where he probably was.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. And from a whole nutrient point of view and calories, potatoes make a lot of sense, and worked well, with the whole Thanksgiving meal. They had special things like that. So okay.
But I probably wouldn't have chosen them.
Okay. Stick to your mustards.
Yes.
So I know
daikon radish is related to all the mustards.
That's true.
And
big, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of starch there.
Good point. Well, listen, okay, we're going to get chemistry and nerdy-gurdy here for a bit. Is it traditional starches, or is it more the complex inulin starch?
Ooh, they're complex.
Okay, I suspected as much. I was hoping, because if it wasn't, I'd be starting to grow, daikon. Okay, back to Earth here. Okay, so I know you grew up with a love of plants, and so it just kind of switched over plants in space. How cool is that? What was probably the most surprising challenge that you found, once you got into it and started hanging out with these people and you said, whoa, I never thought of that. Wow, that affects plants?
Yeah, so one thing that I really wasn't prepared for was learning about the water relations of plants in the microgravity environment. So the physics of microgravity is very different than the physics here on Earth, and the way that the water needs to be taken up by the plants and the way that the water is transported throughout the plant is a little different. And there's a lot of water stress and a lot of not stress happening there, depending on they can be either too hydrated or they can be not hydrated enough. And so getting water properly delivered to the root zone of the plant is really an issue. And
okay, now it's clicking into place, because you don't have the gravity to draw the water down to the roots. I was picturing the water just not traveling once it's inside the plant. Does it still have problem moving?
So that's a good question. Most of the time, the plant is able to transport things fairly well, and it depends on the age of the plant and so on. But getting the water there in the first place, you have to think about surface tension, and it'll stick to the wall of the container. It may not actually. The roots do grow toward water, so hydrotropism is a thing.
Okay.
But at the same time, you have to either present the plant with a gel like an agar, where it's relatively evenly distributed throughout the medium, or you have to
pudding sort of thing,
or you have to think of the substrate in a very particular way, where you're trying to get the water to flow through it, and wicking of the water and things like that. So getting the seeds wet and not too wet as you're trying to get them to germinate. Humidity in the environment is not really the same as what you'd expect, because the water droplets don't really stay suspended in air in the same way. You end up with like globules of water here and there. So it's not like a normal relative humidity that you'd experience in spaceflight.
Okay.
So,
it's like clumpy humidity, I guess. That makes sense.
Humidity.
Yeah. So and you can't just like, what time to water the plants with your watering can?
Yeah.
I guess you get pumps and tubes and flow and.
Yeah. So in the veggie hardware, the astronauts have like this bag of water, and the plant pillow, which is like the little pot for spaceflight that the plants grow in, it kind of has this port like you'd expect for an IV port kind of an idea. And you click connect the bag of water. The astronaut holds the bag of water like under their arm or against their leg or something to press the water into, like through the tube into. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's like a juice box, the 4-year-old.
And you can't really. the sensors aren't really that great at telling you exactly where that water is and if it's gotten everywhere it needs to go properly. And so
you kind of have to
making sure-
eyeball and hope that the moisture is kind of evenly distributed through the.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're right. Because otherwise, like I said, the surface tension is going to cause it to clump up into balls. I mean, just throwing a crazy idea out here, like the pot that it's in, would it be beneficial to have it coated with a super hydrophilic surface so that the water doesn't stick to it? Is that something they're doing, or
Well, yeah,
would
that is
send it
something
up
they
out?
definitely consider when they make the materials and they
Ooh,
put this all
patent,
together.
but
The NASA Tech
you're on it
Transfer
too.
Office
Yeah,
has lots of stuff like that.
So why is the astronaut squeezing it rather than some sort of just reservoir and pump?
Well, that's what happens with the advanced plant habitat.
Okay.
So with the veggie, it's the veggie exists to have plants growing in an environment where it optimizes the amount of time and attention that the astronauts get to interact with the plant. It's all about the psychological benefit of having the plants in their space. And so they get to interact with them as much as possible as they're growing things. And so some things are automated, and there's definitely some automation happening there. Like they don't have to turn on and off the lights and things like that. But part of the experience of taking care of the plants is making sure that they're watered. And it's not always on the schedule to water the plants. That might be something that they have to fit in during their private time.
It's interesting that there is a psychological benefit to making things slightly harder for the astronauts, but at the same time, it allows them to interact again with nature, which is extremely important, even if it's a few, radishes. So that's the whole psychological side.
A launch happening right now. There's Turkish satellite going up right now. I don't know if you can hear that in the background.
Like I pull off my head. No, I can't. Man, swing the camera to. Yeah, so you're where you live, where you can see the rockets going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping for that spaceport here in Texas, and that'll someday.
Closer than you think.
Hopefully. What's the biggest plant that they've successfully grown in space now?
That's a great question. So there was an experiment with, let's see, they've grown radishes recently, which was very successful. Those are, good size. We've grown the red romaine lettuce. When I was an intern here at NASA, we had them growing red romaine lettuce, and that one, they got to be, good size romaine. We have not successfully grown tomatoes yet. Getting there. Peppers will be grown in this year. So we're looking forward to the space chilies.
Oh, you got to send the chili piquins up because they make that nice small bush, and the fruit is really, really super.
Oh, they've been spending so much time getting ready with different. We've actually settled on the Española improved varietal of chilies. So there were a lot of peppers that we expected to do well that had like this compact growth format, but then they ended up really struggling with the light intensity and the humidity, and the elevated CO2 was really a problem. So on the space station,
really,
a lot of people don't realize it, but on the space station there is super elevated and elevated CO2 pretty much all of the time, which is not really that great for astronaut health, honestly. And it's really bad on plants. It's really hard for the plants. And so we have to screen all of our plants that we're going to send to the space station in these specialized growth chambers that we can pump up the elevated CO2 in that space. And if we don't do that, then you end up with, plants that you think are going to do great, and then they don't. So.
Yeah, I know certain gardeners and so forth, they actually have tanks of CO2 in their greenhouses to increase the concentration. And
it's great to a certain level.
So to a certain level, okay.
It's like per million is fantastic for those plants. But then when you get to 10,000 parts per million and you get to 15,000 parts per million, that's a real problem. That's really stressful. Even 5,000 parts per million is really hard on those plants. So there's a threshold. Like, yes, you want elevated CO2 400 parts per million like you find here on Earth, it's not necessarily going to be optimal growth for those plants. But if you get it up higher and higher, then you end up reaching a point where they're oversaturated, and they need to breathe too. They respire.
Yeah.
They don't just photosynthesize. So people forget, like, plants do need to breathe. They need oxygen too.
Yep. Oh, let's see. We have okay, here's an interesting. My apology. What are they doing that makes them not have time to care for the plants if it is part of an experimental study? Everything else.
Yeah. So. So we do have set plant experiments that are part of experimental studies, and this radish study is a great example of it. This is Dr. Hassenstein in Lafayette, and he is getting those plants, those radishes up there for scientific purposes, and so they have those on their schedule. That's great. But then there's other experiments that we have that are all about getting the astronauts fed. That again, it doesn't always appear on the schedule. With all the time they need. Okay. But other things that they're doing the spacewalks. They're taking care of the, like they are rarely
filters and
they really it's hard to schedule the crew time. It really is to get the science done. So in fact, when we're designing experiments, we try to optimize the astronauts' time. Like the experiment that I sent up in 2010, there was one astronaut interaction. After 2 weeks of growth, they inserted the fixative to make sure that the plants, were stable, and then that was it. That was the only thing they needed to do that whole flight. So the less that they can interact with science, the more science you get done.
There's a management joke in there somewhere, but yeah, I can understand that. Going back to tomatoes, if I can ask, because you mentioned that failed. So did it pass all the Earth-based testing, but it didn't grow up there, or they?
So that's one of those that we're having a hard time with the water relations with the tomatoes and getting
tomatoes are sensitive to that.
Yeah, getting things watered properly, and so we can get them to germinate, but we haven't gotten any fruit. So that's one of those that's like, okay, well, soon maybe.
Okay, and I guess you mentioned
entirely.
With peppers and so forth, that brings up the question of pollination. There aren't bees in space. There's uncommon bees here tonight. I don't think so. So yeah, they have to like a little art brush, and
they get to use a paintbrush, or they get to tap with their finger. So we actually do have a protocol for that. In fact, one of the little instruments, it's one of my favorites that we have at Kennedy Space Center. I don't think we're sending this one to space, but it exists. It's super cute. I think it's a Miracle Grow product. I'm not sure, but it's like this cute little stick that looks like an electric toothbrush that has like this little bee on the end, and you can actually like pollinate with this electric.
So it has like a fake bee that. Yeah. I love humans. They are. Let's make our own bee. Yeah, this is great for space. Anyway, okay. So yeah, it's interesting that the difficulties of water and carbon dioxide, generally considered, the easiest parts here on Earth. Let's talk about light then, because I know, you have LEDs and you can fine tune them in. So obviously there are no problems with light, right?
Oh, there's so many problems. So the crop plants that I love working with the most are the microgreens. So those are like the really tiny young plants that are maybe 2 weeks old. And their lighting requirements are fantastically simple. You can give them anywhere from 60 parts per million to 500 parts per million, and they will do okay. Not parts per million. I mean, Ph.D. Photosynthetic. Yeah. I will think of the lux equivalent if I can.
Okay. So yeah, like when you buy a light bulb and it says the lumens sort of thing.
Yeah, the
luminosity.
Lumens are not particularly applicable. We're looking at the photons that hit a given area in a specific amount of time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So the photon flux density. I don't know why I said parts per million. Sorry. But yeah, exactly. That's where my brain was. So we have these little light meters that we test things with. but the the plants that are really light intensive, things like, cotton has fairly high light requirements, and we've grown that one in space. So the Gilroy lab has, they're out in Madison, Wisconsin. And that one, needed a lot of light, but we were able to meet those needs with the hardware that we do have. So we do work with some commercial lighting companies to produce these lights that we use in the lab with specific frequencies of lights that are going to optimize photosynthesis and optimize flowering. And so different stages of the plant's life, we're going to want different lighting regimes, and we want different recipes for those lights.
Okay. So this isn't off the shelf. This is custom made, sort of.
Yeah. We do have some lights that are off the shelf that we use for our testing at Kennedy Space Center, but all the things in spaceflight have to be custom made, because we're dealing with such small spaces. And most of the lighting that is produced for commercial purposes in the United States are expected to be in greenhouses or in a controlled environment that is much higher from the plant. Like, that'll be on the ceiling in a room, and the plant will be, at
8 feet away.
Yeah. And what we are dealing with in these spaceflight environments is you have 10 centimeters between the top of that plant and the light. And it's really easy to burn the plants. And it's really, you have to make sure that the light isn't producing too much heat, as well as making sure that the light is evenly distributed over that small distance. So yeah, we do end up having customized lighting made.
Yeah. So you have like lights. Okay, microphone is the plant. Do you have lights all around it?
Good question. There are some designs where that is the case, but we actually like to see plants where the leaves are growing up. And if you have lights all over the place in microgravity, then the leaves will be growing all over the place.
Okay, so you're trying to direct the growth of the leaves.
We do direct the growth using the light, and that is something that has been studied quite a bit over the years.
And is that just to kind of for optimization of something, or is it to save space, or is it because it looks pretty, or?
Well, okay, saving space is a big thing. Making sure that things will stay in the confined space that we have available for them and won't grow into other experimental spaces. They won't grow into the area that the crews need to live. That's a big thing. But also the plant itself would like to have some idea of what's up and what's down, and we can't do that without light.
Okay.
If we have plants that are given light in every direction, their roots are going to be just forming this really tight mass in the middle.
Gotcha.
And they're not going to necessarily be able to access the water that they need.
So even with the soil covering the roots, there's some signal sent to the roots that says, well, the light is all around us.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Plants are neat.
The plants they can sense the light through the soil,
they can.
Yeah, they can. Little bits of light do end up penetrating into the soil matrix.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Neat. Okay. Do you start the light in the morning here and then have it pretend it's the sun going over, or is it just?
Definitely designs where that's like a plan, but no, we don't currently have that going in the space station. So there are some recipes where it can change with the color of the light depending on the time of day, things like that. But no, we don't really shift the direction of where the light's coming from.
Okay. So here's another question. Does the light affect their gravitational growth? I guess it directs the direction that the plant goes.
So here on Earth, phototropism, which is the plant response to light, and gravitropism, the plant's response to gravity, they're actually processes that have a lot of signaling molecules that are the same. And so they kind of overlap quite a bit. And when we take that gravity away, all we're left with is the phototropism. So my mentor for my Ph.D., Dr. Kiss, looked at phototropism in the spaceflight environment. That is his main focus for his research. and so he's done a lot with that. Here on Earth, when we're trying to get a plant that is, when we're trying to find a mutant that hyper responds to gravity, for instance, all we really need to do is we grow that plant normally, and then we put it on its side and then see how quickly it can respond. If it doesn't respond, then it's an agravitropic mutant. So it's actually kind of fun to see how, if you take these mutants that are agravitropic and you add the light, and you can play with their growth.
You can bend them. It just sounds like a real easy. I mean, this is almost like science fair level in certain regards.
This is prime for science fair. This is great material. If you've got
if you got kids,
experiment.
Talk to NASA. They'll give you a list of plans. Yeah. So that's really cool. Yeah. So you can basically give the plant an idea of direction using the light instead of the combination of light and gravity. So
correct. Yeah.
Cool. Ooh. Sponsor time. That's so interesting. Okay. So next up, just a quick shout out to herbs. So yes, I am a medicine man, but even I sometimes go to other medicine men for help, and one of them is Ricardo Shilly of Herbs. He's located out in East Texas, but he will do an online consultation with you. And actually, I should have put the coupon code there too. If you use the coupon code Forking Weeds, yeah, it's a little obscene. You get a special discount. What do you get? You get like 15%. Yeah, 15%. And then for Campcraft Outfitters, the makers of absolutely the most fantastic outdoor gear for people who don't stay on the trails. So like the canvas, wax canvas sort of stuff that doesn't get shredded the way nylon and plastic and that sort of thing does. So check them out. Give them some love. Tell them I sent you. There's coupon codes there for you. Save you some money. Get you some really cool stuff. Okay, now let's get back to space. Okay. So most of your stuff, I guess, is to be on the International Space Station and the spaceship going to Mars. What about the lunar type stuff? There'd been talk about lunar colonies and things like that.
Yes,
that would be a whole nother.
There's definitely a lot of planning for the plants that could grow in lunar environments. One of my favorite, so NASA collaborates a lot with researchers at universities and in the private sector. And so one of my favorite companies out in Colorado, Space Lab Technologies, they're developing a lunar greenhouse. That's really cool. Yeah.
So it would be on the surface of the moon and take the sunlight, or would it be? Okay. Okay. Just so you know, NASA has some secrets. So. Okay. Moving on. Yeah. Because like the soil. I mean, if you think that my understanding is the moon is basically a chunk of Earth that got knocked off by a really big asteroid or something.
But it's dusty, and that it is not fun to play with that kind of a soil type. We call it regolith, the Lunar Regolith, and there's actually a lab here at Kennedy Space Center called SwampWorks, and I love their name. But they do a lot with the Lunar Regolith. They build robots to not play in the regolith.
The scientists, they're playing.
They're designing.
We know that.
Lunar rovers and things like that, and they get to spend time in those pits with the Lunar Regolith. And the people who do these research projects, they have to wear respirators and suits and things like that to the lung damage that you could get from this dusty stuff is really significant. So yeah, it's not. I mean, there's certainly dust like this on Earth. There's definitely soil types that are comparable on Earth to the Lunar Regolith. But at the same time, it's an interesting beast to play with. And there are simulants that companies have made that you can purchase to grow your own plants in, or to try and do your own little experiments with.
Ooh. I need a link for
And
that.
there's some for Martian Regolith as well. So,
Cool.
and they're very different.
So the pits you were talking about, the swamp work thing, that's actual from the moon then? The way it sounds.
No, that's not.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, I didn't know we brought bags and bags. Okay, so it's still a
Not
synthetic
bags.
form.
But what people did was the scientists studied the lunar regolith that came back, and then they were able to compose something similar here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the surface of the moon here was what is under the dust of the moon. So you have like the surface dust from all the impacts, all the craters, I'm assuming, and then beneath that, eventually you get to hard rock.
Oh, yes, you do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's big chunk of rock with a layer of dust around it, basically.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, I'm embarrassed because I'm mainly Earth-based in science, and so I'm trying to think, like, is a lunar day, how long is a lunar day? Like, if the sun was going over, you hear about the dark side of the moon, but I know that's, is the lunar day, like, how long is, if I'm standing on the moon and it's noon, how long until sunset? Any idea?
The lunar day is a lot like ours, where it's like 24 hours.
It's rotating at the same speed as it's traveling, orbiting. The lunar rotate and the lunar orbit. Okay, that makes sense. Which is why it's always like one side face towards us. Cool.
Well, no. Actually, I just looked this up. It's 29.5 Earth days.
20 what?
29.5 days for the sun to move all the way across the sky and return.
So, like the new moon to new moon sort of thing, then it'd be.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that would then apply. You get, half of that is darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a long night. Yeah. Thank you for encouraging me to look that up.
Tell you, garlic on the moon, they're gonna need it.
Well, that's another good reason to continue using the LED lighting and the. So one of the things that we've played with for a long time is lighting, right? So before LED lighting, there were a lot of other lighting options that NASA was playing around with, and one of them was piping in lighting from outside,
right. Fiber optic type light tube type things, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it got the plants way too hot. It was really hard to control and get a little enough light. The heat transfer that goes along with that is just a lot more than you'd expect, especially when you're dealing with a confined space that the plants are growing in. If it were a much larger habitat for plants and people, then it would be different. But when you're dealing with just like a small, growth chamber type space or small greenhouse, then it's going to get hot very fast with that
makes sense. Yeah. I mean, because I'm assuming space is cold, I believe, if you're not directly in the sun or in the sunlight. And so, I mean, there's a fair amount of insulation that to keep the inside of the space capsule at a comfortable level. So then any extra heat being produced, it just builds up in there over time. Yeah.
And if it's unpredictable, then it's hard to adjust the heating system for it.
Okay. Here's a good question. I'm curious about whether mushrooms have been grown in space.
Oh, that's a great question. There are a lot of plans to use fungal hyphae to build things.
Ooh.
Yeah, which is really cool. But, I don't know of any specific attempts to grow mushrooms as an experiment in space. But you know what we do have a lot of is we have a lot of human-borne pathogens on the space station that proliferate. And while they may not produce
mildew, are we saying?
Bodies, it might not be an intentional scientific experiment. There are lots of molds and fungus and lichen even that grow.
Whoa.
Yeah. So actually, there's the NASA Gene Lab database has like a lot of really cool spaceflight genomics studies that have happened. You can go in; it's fairly user friendly. You can even even if you're not a scientist, you can go in and be like, okay, with these particular experiments, what did they find? And something that's been ongoing for quite a few years now are the studies of just general microbial sampling on the space station. Like sampling
Doorknob wipes,
here and
basically.
there. Yeah. See what's there. And so some of these are in the GeneLab database. And you can go and you can be like, oh, what's on their suits? What's on their dining room table?
Oh boy, that would be, yeah, creepy. Thinking back to mushrooms, one of the issues that might be a problem with mushrooms that you would not have with plants, most mushrooms reproduce by dropping lots of spores, and then they would just drift everywhere, and yeah, that would probably be bad.
That's why they haven't really been approved for science.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They'd have to be in a triple contained unit.
Yeah. Yeah, mushrooms in space. Yeah, that would end badly.
Well, okay. It depends. Okay, so something that we've noticed with microbes and fungus kind of fit into that category for for good part of their life. Their yeast, yeast fit into that general category, right? So something we've noticed is with they end up living different parts of their lifespan longer than other parts. Like they don't ever fruit, they just create a lot of hyphae, or things like that, where it's like they're just doing weird stuff. So there needs to be a lot of study on this, but
there's technological problems that come into play. Yeah,
we got to get the technology there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, we got that's a bad question. Here's an interesting one, and I'm pretty sure the answer, but there are articles claiming human intentions can affect the growth and health of plants. Does NASA do any studies on this? I'm assuming they are so booked up with stuff they don't have time to sit there and tell plants I love them. On the other hand, the astronauts are probably thinking really good thoughts towards the plants.
Yeah.
When they're caring for them.
So I will say that this is not an area of study for NASA, but I will say that the astronauts who enjoy gardening and are put on these plant experiments the plants end up doing better. So the scientists who do not enjoy plants and do not want to have anything to do with plants, those experiments are more likely to fail. So the mood of the astronaut interacting with the plant definitely has a lot to do. And it could be just the fact that they're not, paying as much attention to the plant. They're not, they've got other things on their mind, so their mind isn't entirely on the plant. But it definitely does make an impact.
That makes sense. I know my wife claims that I speak houseplant. I will give her very specific instructions if I'm going away on how to take care of the plants, and she follows them exactly, measuring out the water on a scale, and dead plants. So it's like,
my sister and I had this great conversation once. She's actually really good at growing plants, but she doesn't consider herself a plant person. And we had this conversation once where I came to her house and I was like, your plants, they're screaming at you. And she laughed. She's like, I've got 5 kids. My kids are screaming at me. I can't hear the plants over my kids.
That makes sense. Sorry, plants. 2 legs are better than roots. All right. All right. Here's a really good question. And so Nick, he's the ex-NASA guy. I'm assuming, Nick, you're talking about a long-term adventure. What's the plan for compost or replenishing the nutrients in the soil?
So I'm going to refer you to the University of North Dakota's analog missions that they do. They have a researcher on their team who is totally all about vermicompost. And she is incorporating composting into their spaceflight analog missions. And it's really neat work.
So worms in space.
Yeah.
Why do I have the spice must flow now going through my head? Okay, and so we crashed worms on Mars, and then it just got really big. Oh boy. Okay. Oh, here's a good one then. All right. So for Mark, what are the top plants being considered for growing food for long space missions? Can you answer that, or is that still NASA secret stuff?
No, it's not really NASA secret. Okay, so long duration space flight does have different needs than short duration space flight. So you're looking at plants that can grow longer, and you actually can end up with these amazing designs for full ecosystems for the longer duration space flights, where you've got fruit trees, and there's this group that's really great out. A lot of people don't realize that here in Florida, there's this collaboration between Epcot Center at Disney and the USDA and NASA. And
wow.
Yeah. So there's this one guy.
The conspiracy theorists go nuts, but anyway, continue.
No, it's actually just this little small group of people who Disney approached someone at USDA a long time ago, like, hey, do you want to help manage this stuff that we're doing at Epcot with technology? And he was really good friends with Ray Wheeler, who's my mentor at NASA. And so he's like, let's get NASA in on this kind of a thing. And so it's actually like an official collaboration between USDA, Epcot, and NASA. But the dwarf, like these super dwarf plums that they've developed are just really adorable and wonderful. They fruit really fast and prolific with the amount of fruit, but they have some issues with water uptake, and they're not really practical for Earth applications. But
that's interesting.
But yeah, if you're looking at long duration, you can grow things that would need to take more time to get prepared. The crops that we think of for short term are things that you can pick and you can eat right away, that you don't have to cook, you don't have to do any prep for. So things like, one that I really love is sweet potatoes. And that is definitely consideration for a long-term mission.
The leaves and the tubers are both edible.
You know it.
Yeah, I know something.
The young leaves are just delicious in a salad.
And very nutritious.
They are super nutritious, especially if you get into the ones with a lot of anthocyanins. And there's a lot of different varieties that that have been explored.
Sweet potatoes. It'll be a happy Thanksgiving.
There's a huge variety of things that you really could grow for those longer missions. I love the salad crops, but also things like strawberries, and there's a big list.
So that would imply, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but how far along is the design of the Mars craft? Because it sounds like there's going to be like a pretty large section, maybe by large, I mean like, maybe the size of a phone booth, for growing plants in it.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So a company that's in Madison, Wisconsin, there's a lot going in Madison, Wisconsin, called Orbitech. Also Sierra Nevada Corporation bought them. So they are designing these really cool, they designed the veggie hardware. And so what they did is they designed like this whole wall and like series of walls of things like the veggie hardware that all go together, so that you can have like an entire module of a spacecraft or a space station with these little growth production devices that are really awesome. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of thought. It's not being done by NASA. It's being done by other companies that NASA gives like awards to. Like they apply for grants, and the NASA says, okay, this is a great idea. Let's give you some money to work on this for us, kind of a thing.
When you were talking about the walls and so forth, there's this sci-fi show on Amazon Prime called The Expanse.
Yes.
And I figured you might know it, but yeah, they try and stick kind of real, mostly try and follow the laws of physics and so forth. And like the spaceship, they have the plants all along the walls and little pots, so they can go and harvest everything. And
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another good question. Man, we are burning through time here. But again, from Nick, we are looking at, are they looking to grow a complete diet for long-term missions, or are there things that are simply more efficient to take from Earth and
Okay, that's a really
prepackaged?
wonderful question. So when the reality happens, they don't want the astronauts to feel like they are responsible for making all of their own food and growing all of their own food for things like this. It's really important that we have some prepackaged food there for them. And so what we're doing in space crop production right now is we're really focusing on things that can supplement the existing prepackaged diet for these longer missions. And with planning for, hey, if you're having a good time growing these things and you continue to grow them and have good yields, then you will have more food with more variety for your return mission.
That makes sense. Yeah. It would be kind of scary. Like if you suddenly have something that wipes out all the crop, it's like, okay, we're starving to death in space. But
Yeah, that is
things like
not a
herbs and
situation that
spices,
NASA wants
yeah.
to do. Yeah. So things like leafy greens,
Mhm.
those are wonderful. You can get a whole lot of nutrition out of these, and
Yeah,
you don't
some
have to spend a
spinach.
lot of time growing them.
Wild violets, perhaps, maybe.
Yum.
Yeah. So I want to throw something out to the audience that they may not know about, but you probably do. The taste buds of the astronauts, when they're in space, since there's no gravity pulling the fluids down, their sinuses become swollen and inflamed. They can't smell anything. They have a hard time tasting things. And so a lot of effort has been going into finding foods that actually the astronauts can taste. So that explains things like peppers and the more spicy things.
Yes. You'll notice when you see pictures or videos of the astronauts like eating at their table together, there's astronauts putting the hot sauce on everything.
Yep.
They just want to taste something. And so we'll have them growing things that people here on Earth are tasting going, oh, this is just too strong of a flavor. Oh, who wants this? And the astronauts can't get enough of it, right?
Oh,
because
man.
it's just right for them.
I'm picturing bags of MSG going up into space. Tony Chachere's, NASA blend.
Well, they
That would be
really do
awesome.
like a lot of salt and they like a lot of flavor. So the more flavor we can give them in the variety of things that we have them growing is really great. So things like basil and oregano are on our list of potential crops. Like the onions are on our list of things that we're checking out. The radishes and the mustards and things that give you a bite of flavor that you can really enjoy.
Cool. Okay, here's an interesting question. What about sea veggies like seaweeds and algae? Lots of nutrition there.
There are lots of nutrition there, and that is something that our group is not currently looking at, but there are other groups that are looking at them. Yeah. So our facilities just really aren't set up for the aquaponic type systems that you'd really need to do well with the sea vegetables. So that's not something that we're looking at. But yeah, there's a lot of potential in seaweed. There's potential in kelp.
That would be.
I agree, and for fertilizer too. Not just for human consumption.
Good point. Cool.
Algae is great for biofuels too. So that is really, if we can grow something in a bioreactor in the space station environment that can do well for both human consumption and biofuel, it would be fantastic. You can convince algae to grow quite a lot of fatty acids that you can't get other plants to grow. So there is a lot that we could be doing there.
That's a whole, wow, my brain is going. Back to the oil industry. Ooh. We're looking at that, because there was a lot of work, to make the biodiesel type molecules just straight from algae rather than, using corn to do it. So,
in fact,
we're getting low on fuel. No lunch today.
Heike Sederoff is a former NASA-funded researcher in academia who has shifted almost entirely to algae biofuels. So, this is an area that's a passion for a lot of people.
And I'm just, a biofuel powered space vehicle. That would be America. That'd be awesome.
Well, especially it's great because you'd be able to to have some fiber or something for the human diet from this, as well as all of what you need. Anyway.
Yep. Here's another good question for people. Do they have to carry the water, or is there water for the plants? So yeah, they got to carry every drop of water up.
Well, there is a water recycling system.
Okay. We won't ask where the water comes from, but yeah, okay.
They do have to carry quite a bit of water with them. It's not a perfect system by any means, but there is some water reclamation happening on the International Space Station. The Russian system is actually different from the American system. The American system purifies the water with an iodine that's then pulled out of the water. The Russian system uses silver. So we can't actually mix the watering systems in our plants. We have to choose for the experiment which system we want to use, because
the residual silver and iodine, and
it's not a good idea.
Yeah, you don't want to mix silver iodine.
It is really interesting. We have done some studies on plants that have been grown with the Russian water that has some residual silver in it. The plants do take up the silver. It could potentially get ingested by the astronauts. So that is something to think about. It may not be really a concern, but it is.
It's interesting that there's two different water systems out there, I guess. Yeah, well,
hopefully we settle on one water system when it comes to something like a lunar base.
Yeah, that would be nice. And then at least on the moon, there is some water there that they found. So we won't have to lift everything off Earth, because that's pretty expensive.
Well, and there's also the possibility of mining asteroids.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Yeah, there's at least one company in Houston that is talking about that. Okay, holy moly. Okay, let me throw out another sponsor here. I definitely got to do a shout out to Arborists. So if you are looking to have any tree surgery done, give Arborists a call. They are the best of the best. If you have weird mushrooms growing in your tree, usually that's not a good sign. If you have a weird bug tunneling into it, that's not a good sign. But they are actually set up to analyze and figure out how to, if possible, save the tree. What treatment is best to do that. Something else they have really cool is they have come up with a bacteria that pretty much turns any plant into a nitrogen fixing plant that NASA might be interested in. They actually have patents on it so far, so I might have to hook you guys up there. So yeah, very cool stuff there. And then of course, Uncommon Bees. They are the ones that keep me highly glucosed. And they got their coupon code. Normally the Forking Weeds gives you 10% discount anytime. And on Thursdays from 8 until 9:30, you get a 25% discount on their products, which is pretty amazing. So, okay, cool. We got 3 more minutes. My mind is racing. There's so many cool things like algae and so forth. And what has been the astronauts' favorite plant so far? And I guess it kind of varies from, because it's not the same astronauts, but
yeah,
what were ones they said, yeah, we definitely want this when we go to Mars. Has there been anything that fell into that?
They loved that red lettuce, the red romaine lettuce. They went crazy for that one. They also, they keep asking for Mizuna, which is a mustard.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I remember seeing that in some articles now.
Yeah.
I guess for the flavor.
Yeah, it's just a really. It's actually not that flavorful. It's kind of a mild mustard, but it's kind of looks like arugula. It's fun to grow. It has a lot of green. That's a great question. They're going crazy for these radishes. We did not expect them to love the radishes so much. They were begging and begging. They were not originally going to be eating the radishes. That was not part of the science. And so they had to tweak things and really get permission from everyone to.
So what was the plan with the radishes then?
To grow them.
And then bring them back.
Experiment and bring them back. Freeze them, bring them back. And so they had to beg Dr. Hassenstein, hey, can you give up some of your samples?
Okay, years of working with scientists. Yeah, the concept that, and then they will freeze this delicious treat that they've been begging for and send it back in the name of science. It's like, okay, come on, guys.
Yeah.
It's funny some of the blind spots that scientists can have when they just go full focused on this. Oh well. Oh, okay. Here's a good question. We're running a little over, but have plants grown larger in space? Because of the
Such a
lack of
fun
gravity.
question. Yeah. So it depends on the space you give them to grow in. So if you give a plant a confined space, then they're going to fill that space and not go too much beyond it. There have been problems where like plants that grew really compact here on Earth did end up taking a little bit more space than we expected, and it kind of crowded out other plants that were growing. So that definitely has happened, but it's more species specific. It's not everything grows crazy. Some plants are stunted significantly, and others, they thrive. So it really depends on the plant.
Okay. Along that, one more. I'm gonna hold you here a little longer.
It's okay. I planned for another half hour. So.
Oh, cool. Have they done any vine plants? Like, have they done sweet potatoes up in space yet, or just on Earth yet? Because I'm wondering if the lack of gravity affects where the plant sends the vines even.
That is definitely something that we'd like to see. So there's some, definitely haven't seen sweet potato up there yet. But there have, and part of the reason for that is it's hard to grow sweet potato from seed. Usually you grow it from the tubers. So sending up the sterile tubers, like you have to sterilize things really thoroughly before putting them in the flight hardware, and it kind of kills them to get them that clean.
Gotcha.
But seeds with their protective coat, you can do a lot to treat a seed and make sure it's really clean before sending it up. We're trying to get further away from that and make it possible to bring things like tubers up and rhizomes. But not yet. It would be really fun to do something like a pea that's that has all of those little tendrils.
Yeah, and just see what it does if it's just like floating.
Yeah,
it would be neat.
There have been some studies with peas in space, but they were bush peas.
Okay, right, yeah.
Like they chose varieties that were bushes rather than, you can grow them so that they're viney, or you can grow varieties that are more bush-like. More
bush-like, yeah. Wow. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. But it's a little after 9 now, and life beckons, and we might, beg and plead do you come back at some point. But thank you so much for taking an hour to spend with us and just, talk about being a space farmer. It's all sorts of wild stuff that never occurred to me that was an issue, and some of it, once you think about it, makes sense, like gravity pulling the water down to roots. No, that doesn't happen. So I'm just picturing the astronauts with the juice boxes squeezing the water and then squeezing at each other and getting into a water fight, which would probably be bad. But it's a fascinating concept. And the trouble of because now you can buy these growth chambers for your countertop and have fresh herbs all the time, and it's like, just stick that.
Kind of have one of those here in my laundry room.
Oh yeah. And so why can't you just stick one of those up in space? Well, it's a lot more difficult than that.
A lot more difficult, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you all, tribe, for showing up and spending time and learning a little bit more about your world and the area outside your world. Cool.
Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. All right, everyone. Have a great evening. Think on what you learned. If you have questions, throw them to me. I can send them on to Christina, and maybe we can get them answered. And but hopefully you got something out of this. All right. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.